I'm Aaron Davis with Fast Pinball. We're at PinDevCon here on the Sunday at the Northwest Pinball Show. And in our continued effort to meet up with all the people who've brought homebrew games and different projects to the show, Anthony van Winkle is joining me on stage.
Hello, Aaron.
Welcome.
Yes, thank you. It's nice to be here. Sunday is always the quietest of the days, so we can relax and get ready to pack it all up.
Yeah, we figured we can just kind of coast for the last day, and we packed in to try and get all these last interviews in, just because I think it's a chance to kind of capture and commemorate that we all got here, all limbs intact, maybe some cuts and solder burns and stuff like that. But we'll get out of here with most of the tools we brought, probably some tools somebody else had, but we'll work it out later.
Find a couple of screws at the bottom of the box, and you're like, yeah, okay, I'm sure that's worth something.
So you've had a couple Swords of Vengeance games here. So you're working on the 2.0 project based on the Swords of Fury game. I'm having a hard time figuring out questions to ask because I know all about this project and I hear about it all the time. But one thing that I really enjoyed that I got to see for the first time was your interview yesterday with Amy Waters, the composer that worked on this game. And, I was aware of some of the things you were doing musically on this, but to see it laid out the way they did in that presentation, and we made a video of this, and so that'll be posted online to watch. Definitely check it out. It's impressive. But the detail of what you guys put into that process of defining the music, how it worked into the games was very impressive.
Thank you.
So I know that when I spoke to her briefly, she said this was the first chance she got to actually play the game and see it in real life. So what was that like to see it all kind of come together and her be able to play it in real life?
Well, that's one of the challenges with making a pinball game. It's not like a video game where you just send them a link and they download.
Fresh download,
especially Swords of Fury, which has under 3,000 ever made, and after 35 years, how many still exist?
Right.
So the probability of anybody being able to play this game is already very slim. Yeah. Amy is one of 4 artists that I have commissioned working on the project.
Okay.
She's the composer, and I have 3 other graphical artists for the different characters and the landscapes and the creatures. One is in Texas, one is in New York, and one is in Germany.
Wow.
So the probability of having the whole team play the game at some point, very slim.
So you felt like a world tour at some point where everyone get a
sure.
chance to play it.
But it is exciting because the music is such an important part. I mean, not just because with pinball you need something, you need that motivation, you need that encouragement, but the legacy of Swords of Fury. I mean, I would say there are 2 things that people love about Swords of Fury: the music and Lion Man.
There you go.
And so those are the 2 things when I'm making a sequel that have to be there to pay homage to the original. And the fact that the main instruction I gave was, when you walk up to a machine, it needs to grab you. One of my examples was TNA.
Okay.
Whether you care for the gameplay, as soon as you start playing and that bass starts thumping, I'm in this.
Yes.
And that's exactly what I was going for.
Well, I think that, it's been really cool watching your process because, everybody that's working on pinball projects, I'm fortunate enough to witness everyone's process on these things. You've taken a very, I guess, production or you picked all the right people on your roster to do the work. So you can have your vision and find the right people to execute it and stuff. So I think that's something that I think a lot of people have the impression of making a pinball machine starts as a cobbled together homebrew project. I think you looked at, my impression was that you took an existing playfield that had a lot of great stuff on it and said, I want to tell a different story on this pinball stage here. So I think that that's something that again, I've got to witness a lot of that process. And again, watching people over there playing the game has been really exciting, and we sit there, it's the closest game to our booth. So we kind of sit there and listen to people going, this is really cool. I love the way the story is. The graphics look really great, So, I mean, have you eavesdropped on those experiences or got to chime in with people playing?
Yeah, I mean, the feedback has been very positive. I mean, I've still got pages and pages of notes on all the things that are going wrong, all the problems, everything that I have to fix. But especially compared to last year, I mean, the game is stable, it runs, it's doing everything that it's supposed to do, and people are really connecting with it. So that's very encouraging.
Yeah.
And just the sheer number of people who've said that they have Swords of Fury machines.
Seriously.
That's more than I thought still existed. So it's very encouraging that this is a loved title that people will hold on to, that people will take care of. And so breathing some fresh life into it. I do not consider it a 2.0 game. I consider it a sequel.
Sure.
Because it is standalone, but it takes place in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, the challenge of having an existing playfield is you have to make sense of what's on the playfield. But it also does save you having to do the layout.
Yeah.
As Jack was mentioning earlier, layout is hard. I have never done a layout.
Yeah.
My first game, Mass Effect, I started on Game of Thrones. And I literally built it in the Game of Thrones machine until I was ready to start doing the homebrew construction. I made a couple of changes, to places that I didn't like, but I didn't have to say, oh, is this lane too wide or is this ramp too steep. I just bought Game of Thrones ramps and there they go.
Right.
And same thing with Swords of Vengeance. It's starting with the playfield eliminates the uncertainty. If somebody doesn't like a shot, well, they can blame Williams in 1988. Yeah, this shot was tested. This shot was validated.
Somebody signed off on this.
Signed off on it, and so using that as the constraint, is a different approach rather than having a completely blank whitewood where like, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed with all the possibilities. It's like, this is what you have. You have these ramps, you have these shots, you have artwork that makes no sense. Justify it.
Right. Well, and I think that's the thing too, is that anybody who decides, I want to make a pinball machine, I want to do something in pinball, there's a lot that it takes, and I think that again, your approach, and I think it was great you brought up Mass Effect as well, because, if you're not having to solve geometry, you can focus on world building, storytelling, and creating an experience and stuff like that too. And I think that for a lot of people, their experience in game creation, not pinball making, translating game experience to pinball is a lot easier if you're not having to solve geometry and engineering at the same time. Yeah. So I think that's a really cool thing you've been able to do. And, like I said, I completely forgot about the Mass Effect experience, but I think that that's a really cool way to say, I want to get to the part of making pinball I really enjoy, and if cutting wood and bending metal is not the place to start, I think you got a good track for that. We were talking before we got online here. Maybe it was recorded. I don't know. But I was telling you about, I watch people post online about this project. And so it keeps coming up like, when can I get this? Look how cool this is. And I saw this morning, someone was talking about how cool it was. And they tagged the original composer of the music for the game. And I shared that you had done an interview with Amy the other day, Amy Waters. And he was very impressed, so it was great to see that somebody knew somebody who was familiar with the game and then able to connect them to your work, so that's pretty great. To be able to do something that pays homage. I think what you did is a really good way to say, here's what people know and love about this game. And then where you take it from here is very respectful to the property, but also lets you go some new places. So this world that you built, what do you want to do with it from here? Do you have grander visions? Is there anything you want to share about that?
Well, I mean, unlike taking a licensed property or a movie or something, this concept was designed specifically to be a pinball game.
Okay.
So when I'm thinking about how to build the game, I like mode-based games. I like narrative-based games.
Okay.
Mass Effect was my obvious choice for a pinball game because the mechanics and the story of the video game translate very well into a pinball game. Whereas Swords of Vengeance is designed to be a pinball game, so it's more like the adventure, the story of the game is based on what you can do on a pinball machine. Mm-hmm. So I think that the world itself, we could have some Lion Man novels. We could have a spin-off TV show about the orc sorceress or something. But the idea is that the world can be fully fleshed out and communicated through pinball.
Okay.
Both through the in-game content, the call-outs, the dialogue, the history, and things like that, but also supplemental content like strategy guides that explain not only what shots you're supposed to hit in this mode, but what is the story? Why is the character in this swamp? Or why are they scaling these cliffs? What does this boss fight mean? And so trying to communicate a narrative about the world through the pinball game, but also supplemental to the pinball game. So that way it's not like somebody who's seen the movie loves the game because they love the movie. And if you haven't seen the movie, the game makes no sense.
Right. We're back? All right, we're back.
All right.
Okay. So you're talking about the supplemental content, and I think that, when you do create these big worlds, like you're saying, some people who might casually just walk into the game may not even know that depth exists. So I can imagine that if you have that supplemental content, I'm sitting, getting my oil changed, I got to wait a half an hour, whatever that is, to be able to look through these guides, I might be inclined to go back and seek out what you're finding there. So talk about how that guide structure is, what are your intents in guiding people through, bringing them back into the game?
Well, this is a system that I developed for Mass Effect originally, that basically tracks the progress through the game. And then when you're done, you can get a strategy guide that says, these are the modes you unlocked and this is what you did.
Okay.
But then I had a lot of friends who never played Mass Effect.
Sure.
So I was like, well, I might as well explain what's going on, who these characters are, why the story is happening. So the idea of being able to expand on the story or do things that you couldn't do necessarily on the back box. If you have a spectator there, they can see what's going on and they get the story, but the person who's playing doesn't get it.
Right.
And a lot of people, they just jump right in. So most people who come up to the game for the first time don't realize that the game starts with a mode select, which is also your character select.
Right. Okay.
So somebody just plays the game, and this actually happened this morning because the two characters have slightly different gameplay rules.
Sure. Okay.
So one person was wondering why when they were playing, the center ramp sent it across the bridge to the drop bank, and when their friend was playing, it went down to the third.
Just based on the character.
Just based on the character, because the orc character is a faster game. You're not spending as much time in holds. You're not spending as much time in the mini playfield because you want to pep your game. If you want a slower game, if you want to play with the drop bank, choose the human character.
Right.
So these are the types of things where as somebody jumps in, they might not get it. But if you come back to the game enough times and start to wonder, hey, why did that thing happen? Or why is this different than it was before? That gets people into the guides and be like, oh, that explains it. Oh, and by the way, here's the story as well. So
very cool. Well, we've already talked for 10 minutes now. I mean, this is fantastic. I'd say that everything that you've said here is what makes making pinball for me feel even more daunting. The detail and the effort you put into the story and the depth and the big picture is so impressive. And I hope everybody gets to go and play Swords of Vengeance out there. It'll be out when it's done. And I think that any chance that you can to come and try it out, experience it, I think it's great. So Aaron Davis, Anthony Van Winkle, PinDevCon, Northwest Pinball Show. We're so glad you're here. Thanks for listening.
thank you.